What if I told you that taking a train in America is about as fast as walking? Okay, not literally, but it sure feels like it. In Europe, you hop on a train, sip an espresso, and 2 hours later, you're in another country. In the US, you hop on a train, get a snack, take a nap, think your life choices, and you're still in the same state. So, why is America, the land of innovation, so far behind when it comes to trains? Why do Europeans get high-speed rail while Americans get whatever this is? Think I'm exaggerating? Stick around and let's see just how bad it really is. Believe it or not, there was a time when the US had one of the best train systems in the world. In the 1800s, railroads didn't just connect cities, they built a country. Trains were the backbone of American expansion, driving industry, trade, and even entire towns. Meanwhile, in Europe, railroads were also expanding, but for a completely different reason. Countries were so close together that trains were the perfect way to connect them. So, if the US started off strong, what went wrong? Well, a few things. First, cars. The rise of a car industry in the early 20th century meant Americans didn't have to rely on trains anymore. Then, after World War II, the US went all in on highways. In 1956, President Eisenhower signed the Federal Aid Highway Act, which basically made cars and planes the kings of transportation. Meanwhile, Europe, especially after the war, chose to double down on trains, rebuilding and modernizing their rail system instead of covering their countries in freeways. In other words, America bet on cars, Europe bet on trains. And today, we see the results. Europe has world-class high-speed rail, and the US has Amtrak, which still runs on tracks that probably remember Abraham Lincoln. Or, to put it another way, America put all its money on highways and airports, while Europe kept its railways modern. And today, let's just say one of those bets paid off. But it's not just history. There's a reason why European trains are fast and reliable, while American trains feels like they're stuck in time. Let's talk about that. If you've ever taken a train in Europe, you know the deal. Smooth, quiet, ridiculously fast. Trains like the French TGV, Germany's ICE, and Spain's AVE all cruise at over 186 miles per hour. In Japan, the Shinkansen hits 200 miles per hour like it's nothing. Meanwhile, in the US, Amtrak's so-called high-speed train at Sala makes out 150 miles per hour. But let's be real, it usually averages around 66 miles per hour. That's right, on some routes, taking a train in America is barely faster than driving. In Europe, you can cross entire countries in just a few hours. In the US, it takes almost 19 hours to go from New York to Chicago by train. 19 hours. That's longer than a flight to Australia. And if that wasn't bad enough, Amtrak is famous for delays. Since it shares tracks with freight trains, it often has to stop and let cargo trains pass first. Imagine you're on a plane and the pilot comes on and says, "Oh, folks, we're just gonna pull over and let this FedEx truck go first." That's basically how Amtrak works. In Europe, passenger trains have priority. They run on dedicated tracks, making them faster and more reliable. And the best part, they actually arrive on time. If you're wondering why American trains are so slow, here's the short answer. Outdated infrastructure, shared tracks, and a government that treats trains like a forgotten side project. Or to put it another way, Europe has bullet trains, and we have a system where cargo trains carrying toilet paper gets priority over human passengers. But speed isn't the only issue. Let's talk about why Americans don't even use trains in the first place. Alright, so we know American trains are slow, but that still doesn't explain why so few people use them. I mean, in Europe, trains are part of everyday life. Need to get from Paris to Berlin? Train. London to Amsterdam? Train. In the US, the idea of taking a train between cities sounds almost exotic. But why? Well, the biggest reason is simple. America was built for cars. Unlike Europe, which developed around rail networks and dense cities, the US expanded outwards. Suburbs grew, highways spread, and suddenly owning a car wasn't just convenient, it was necessary. Today, most cities are so car dependent that even if a great train system existed, most people will still need a car to get to and from the station. And trust me, I learned this the hard way. When I first came to the US, I thought I could just take a train to places like I did in Europe. Yeah, no. I quickly realized that unless you're in New York or maybe Chicago, public transportation is basically non-existent. In Europe, I could step outside, hop on a tram or a train, and be at my destination in minutes. In America, you need a car for everything. Even picking up milk at the store feels like a mini road trip. Then, there's money. In Europe, governments heavily fund trains, treating them as an essential public service. In the US, not so much. Highways and airports get billions in federal funding, while Amtrak is basically that one kid at the family dinner who keeps getting ignored. But let's not even talk about how some politicians hear the word public transportation and immediately assume it's socialism. And finally, there's culture. Americans just aren't used to taking trains. Most people either drive or fly because that's just what you do. Meanwhile, in Europe, the train isn't just an option, it's an obvious choice. Cheap tickets, reliable service, and high-speed connections make it a no-brainer. So with all that, it's no surprise that train ridership in US is low. But here's the twist. America has one of the most successful train systems in the world, just not for people. Alright, so we've established that American passenger trains are not great. But here's the twist. While Europe wins in moving people, US is actually world-class in moving stuff. Freight trains in America are an absolute powerhouse. In fact, US has the most efficient and profitable freight rail system in the world. Trains here move everything: coal, cars, oil, Amazon packages, you name it. And they do it in a way cheaper than trucks or planes. In Europe, most cargo gets hauled by trucks, but in the US, freight trains cover over 140,000 miles of track. That's enough to circle the Earth almost 6 times. And because freight is king in the US, passenger trains always take a backseat, literally. Amtrak doesn't even own most of its tracks. It has to rent them from freight companies, which means if a cargo train needs to pass, your Amtrak ride gets delayed. Imagine waiting at a red light, but instead of a couple of cars passing, it's a 2-mile-long train, carrying corn, steel, and probably a few lost FedEx boxes. Don't get me wrong, freight rail is one of the few areas where American trains actually work. It's just funny that in a land of innovation, we can move millions of tons of coal across the country in a record time, but a train full of actual human beings can make it from New York to Boston without a delay. While Europe has futuristic high-speed passenger trains, America has the best system for delivering your Amazon orders. Progress? But here's the big question. Can the US ever catch up to Europe and actually build a high-speed rail system? Let's talk about that. So, will America ever get a high-speed rail system that actually competes with Europe? Well, maybe, but don't hold your breath. There has been attempts. California started working on a high-speed rail project back in 2008. And as of today, it's still under construction, way over budget, and only expected to cover part of the state. Florida's Brightline is doing better. It's the first privately funded high-speed rail in the US and connects Miami to Orlando at speeds up to 125 miles per hour. Not quite bullet train level, but hey, progress. Other states like Texas have proposed high-speed rail projects, but they keep running into the same problems: money, politics, and honestly, a lack of public demand. Unlike Europe, where trains are a no-brainer, most Americans still see driving or flying as the better option. And let's be real, if you tell someone in Texas to take a train instead of driving their truck, you might as well have insulted their grandma. But here's the thing, there's hope. Younger generations are more open to public transportation, and as cities get more crowded, high-speed rail could start making more sense. Plus, with rising fuel costs and environmental concerns, trains are energy-efficient alternative that could actually save Americans time and money in the long run. Will America ever have a train system like Europe's? Maybe in the future. But for now, if you ride a bullet train, your best bet is still a plane ticket to France or Japan. But what do you think? Would Americans actually use high-speed rail if we had it, or are we just too attached to our cars? Let me know in the comments. And hey, if you enjoyed this, don't forget to like and subscribe and hit that bell, because unlike an Amtrak train, this channel is actually on schedule.